The first ascent of any route is clearly very special, but often you only hear about it afterwards in books or indeed on the internet. What makes this unique is we were there. We captured every moment, every move, every slip, every scream. This is Dave MacLeod's journey to hell and back.
He's coming towards me. If he does not stay on this hold, then my friend's going to die.
It was probably the most scariest bit of filming I've ever done.
Maybe I don't even be involved in that type of thing again.
When I heard the first scream, that was pretty horrible.
If something goes wrong in the middle of the route, then I'm probably going to die.
In August 2007, a group of the world's top climbers converged in the Lochran Basin deep in the heart of the Cairngorms to attempt the first ever high-definition live broadcast of multiple climbs. But as can often happen in this fine country, the weather was not our friend.
Gary to Sato, seeing up Dave.
Just to be realistic, at the moment, looking at the weather, I don't feel that that's really going to be a goer.
Seeing up Dave, trying on Channel 11.
And as we headed home depressed, dejected and disappointed, a select few stayed behind because they had some unfinished business. Leading that group is Dave MacLeod, originally from Dumbarton, now living in Fort William. He's currently one of the best climbers in the world. One of a tiny elite who's writing a new chapter in the history of climbing. And what he's attempting in the Cairngorms is his most dangerous route yet.
Yesterday was the scariest day of my life, and it was the end of the scariest 10 days of my life. The lead of my great climb project on Hell's Lung was hanging over me like a guillotine. It's the most dangerous route I've ever done, and right now I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Falling off from the crux would have meant death, 80 feet right to the gully bed.
Once in a generation, someone appears and achieves things that everyone else previously thought impossible. Dave MacLeod is one such man.
When I actually tried hard climbing, I found that I felt least comfortable in myself just after completing a hard route and most comfortable in the early stages of trying one. I think these days I feel like really bored and empty in my climbing when there's nothing to challenge me. It's as simple as that. When I try a really hard route, there's lots of questions, lots of unknowns that I don't know if I can get over, and that's exciting, and that's when I feel happiest. And the thought of having no more scary leads ahead of me is the scariest thing I can imagine.
Dave MacLeod's well used to danger, yet when he returned to tackle that great climb route, he was embarking on a project that would not only take him, but also our safety and film crew into new and uncharted territory.
To be in a position where voluntarily something out with their control could mean that they die, and it's a very significant possibility that it will happen. It really was the most harrowing thing I've ever filmed.
For me, at the bottom, I was aware that it being serious and the consequences of him falling off would mean that he would probably land where I was.
He certainly could have died. It wasn't just the hype from TV or something. It was very, very serious, and if he'd slipped or fallen off, you know, he probably would have died.
But how does a climber like Dave MacLeod start work on a new route? This is the most extreme of extreme climbing, where the first task is to try to envisage where a new line might go on a rock face. Dave is neither foolhardy nor reckless. He wasn't attempting a new route simply because we were there with our cameras. This is something he would have done anyway.
My brief is simple, to climb something very hard and preferably a new route. I'm more into steep climbing, so I opted for Hell's Lung and went to have a look at it. I knew there was new lines to climb in there, but I'd never seen them up close.
The hardest climbs are graded by E numbers, that's E for extreme. To put that into context, most weekend climbers would be happy if they can get to E1 or even 2. Full-time climbers might make it to E5 and E6, maybe even E7 or E8, routes of incredible technical difficulty. At the start of last year, Dave MacLeod changed all that at a stroke, completing the hardest traditional rock route in the world and creating the new grade of E11 on a route called Rhapsody. Now Dave's after a new hard route here in the Cairngorms, but bad weather in the weeks leading up to the Great Climb television programme made even finding the way to the crag difficult.
I just can't wait to see what's there, you know. Some people's inspiration from climbing is just to see the lines, and I'm inspired by that as well, but for me the main thing is when I actually see the moves and the holds, that's what gets me really psyched. So I know that's about to happen, so I can't wait.
Where do you think Hellslum is?
Well, I've never climbed on it. I don't really know, I don't recognise the terrain at all. We don't have very much to go in. Really.
I think we've got to go that way.
Well, it's not too bad. It isn't pouring, but we can only see about 20 yards over there, and that's it. But it's still fantastic to come in and look at this crag again. And it's actually even better to come here in the mist. It looks really inspiring looking over the edge of it into the mist and everything. So I'm quite excited just to be here with a rope and I can abseil down and have a look. Oh yes! I can only see about halfway down. There's like a brilliant wall with a crack right up at just there. It's a huge wall, you know, it's really exposed and it's very steep, so I'm really into like overhanging steep climbing, so that'll be really exciting. It looks like there's more than one line, maybe 2 or 3 lines here that look like you could do. There's an amazing one just right over there that finishes here, and then as the wall drops away underneath us here, there's 2 longer routes, but I can't actually see halfway down them because of the mist right now, so I'll only know once I go off and dangle down into the mist and see what's what. I'll dangle off down in the rope and then just look at things. I'll place some gear on the way down so I can stay in close to the crag, and then see if I can identify all the lines to do, and then if there's one that stands out, then I'll maybe have a closer look and see just how hard it's going to be. It's massive. That's brilliant. I guess E4 must come at this groove here on the left. It's a bit of a crack to do here. Now, there is the line. Pretty steep right below me as well. There's definitely things to do down there. There's a big arete, a big overhanging arete, that looks like it's a really good feature, but the line tends to keep leading you off to the right of it onto easy ground. It's pretty spooky down there, just hanging around in space. You could just go easily up the crest of the prow, or you could go back into the groove and do a second pitch that doesn't look too bad. But what I'm going to do now is abseil down the other big line, which is this wall just here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit shorter. This one seems about 45 metres maybe.
Unlike the rest of us, pioneers like Dave MacLeod are actively seeking out the most difficult lines on a rock face. The harder it is, the better they like it.
Well, I reckon the verdict on that one is it might be a little bit too easy. I think it's an E6.
Is that worth doing it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I don't know. I think I need to do a couple more E6s and figure it out, because when I abseil down it's like, oh, those look really good. But then when you come back here and I look down at the wall and I see the rope just going well out from the wall, and you actually think, God, it's actually pretty overhanging. Now, where's the line I want to be in? It's right here. It might work out really well, you know, because you've got the classic situation where it's like, oh yeah, it was alright. So you know, and then you get on the day and it's like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
On that first day's reconnaissance, 2 months before the Great Climb was due to happen, Dave had decided to try a new route that would be graded E9. A hugely ambitious undertaking, given the pressures of a live television broadcast. But as Dave returned to Hellslum, he saw another possible new route that was even harder. He broke the news on his blog.
The Great Climb, I might try something a bit harder. On my first day on the climb, I looked across at this beautiful marbly wall that looked utterly inspiring. And when I abseiled down it, I found a perfect line of minuscule brick edges running up the wall, but with extremely little protection available. But yesterday I got stuck into actually trying it, and I found that I could actually pull on those holds, and that was quite a surprise. And after a while I linked it in one go. The thing is, falling from the hard part would mean certain death, no question.
When I read Dave's blog about what could happen on the climb, I laughed it off, really, didn't take it very serious at all. And then I realised that he wasn't joking. And when I looked at him on the days leading up to the climb, I started to feel nauseous at the potential consequence of what could really happen. Suddenly, it went from being a fun television programme to being very, very serious indeed. Dave believes that this new route will be graded at E10, 80 metres of exceptionally hard climbing. Not the most technically difficult route he'd ever done, but undoubtedly the most dangerous and the hardest mountain climb in Britain.
It's an immediately intimidating place to be because it's this dank, dark gully. There's water dripping down 2 of the 3 walls. And the third wall, which is what Dave was climbing up, just looked like a completely blank face to me. So I was just immediately in awe of the situation.
Tony Waite is one of 2 belayers Dave is using to protect him on the route. They manage the ropes. At this level, you need someone you can trust implicitly with your life. Dave's other belayer is his wife, Claire.
I go to the rocks with him, to the crags with him. I know how dangerous he's being, and if I can keep my finger on that, then all the better.
Well, this is Friday, the day before the broadcast. Today I'm just doing my final preparations to try this route here. And so I've been practicing some moves and just making sure that I've got all the protection as good as it possibly can be. When you get to this hold, it's a really, really lonely place to be. You can stop in the middle of the wall and chalk up your hands again, but you're committed. Like, the only way is to fall or climb it. So you get 2 straight choices. But to climb up is terrifying and to fall off is terrifying. So you're like, oh. So you stop here and you get time to think. That's the problem.
One day before the Great Climb broadcast, there's perfect weather in the Cairngorms. Dave's on the rock face, working the route, trying out individual moves with the safety of a rope from above. It's now obvious where the most difficult, or crux, section of the climb will be.
This move here is the most worrying move on the whole route, because you have this really bad sloper, and you've got to reach into a hold you can't see in the groove there, but you're just at the maximum height above the gear, and you're potentially looking at falling from here and bouncing off the ground. Your heart's going to be in your mouth, basically. But there's a piece of gear here, this sky hook. Basically what the piece of gear is a little metal hook. And normally when you get rock climbing protection, it jams in place, so it's really solid, it doesn't move anywhere. But this thing, it just hooks on, just like that. But the problem is that with the movement of the rope, it just wobbles about and can fall off. But I only need it for one move, and it could make all the difference. If it holds, then I'll fall 10 feet. But if I don't have it in and I fall off, I'm going to fall 100 feet and maybe hit the ground. The first part of the route isn't too bad, up to this flake you can see here. And that's where I get some protection in there. But the problem is that the flake there is a little bit loose, you know, it's hollow. The hardest moves are just in these really small holes just across from me here. And if I fall from these, hopefully the gear in the flake will hold me. And if it holds, then fine, it's no problem. But if it rips, then I'm going to fall again onto the gear below that, which is much further down the wall. And if that happens, then I'm going to take, well, it's about 80 or 90 foot from me to the ground just now. And I'm going to probably bounce off the rocks in the bottom there. The rope might come tight before I hit the ground, or it might not. So I'm going to get my wife Claire to come along and belay. And if I fall, I'm going to get her to throw herself down the gully, running as fast as she can, to take in as much rope as possible. I know that sounds weird, but it does actually work, and it saved me on a couple of occasions already. And Claire's one of the best people that I know for doing that kind of extreme belaying.
By now, camera people, safety officers and belayers are being caught up in Dave's plan. It makes perfect sense to him, but privately, the team harbours doubts it would actually work. We've been with Dave for a number of weeks. Away from the Cairngorms, he's attempting other extreme new routes nearer his home.
I like to try routes that start off being really impossible for me. We're just at Steel Hut Crag in Glen Nevis just now. There's a couple of projects here that fall into that category. Like, I've been trying and trying for days and days, and I can only just do the individual moves. This one route I'm trying, I probably have to lose a stone, train 5-6 days a week all through the winter, and just try this all through the winter and gear all my preparation just towards this route. It's great. It's, for me, that's brilliant because I've found something that will be really good if I do it. I find that once I've already started trying a route and get really serious about it, no matter how many setbacks I have, I can't make myself let it go. I just have to keep going and find a way to work through whatever the setbacks are. And I think that's maybe why you would say I would be obsessed. Guilty. To get in shape for these routes, you have to spend a lot of time actually on the route learning the moves until you don't just know the moves off by heart, you know every little position, every little trick, and the exact speed you've got to do the moves, and everything has to be perfect. But outside of that, you have to do a lot to get in shape as well. So a lot of time at home just hanging off my fingerboard. It's like that's the key for climbing. You've just got to support your weight on really small holds. You're spending years just hanging by your fingers, trying to gain strength. I've been climbing for years now, and I know certain areas in Scotland and the world really, really well. But the Cairngorms is a whole area with loads and loads of rock that I've not explored at all. So it's a great opportunity for me to go and have fun looking and discovering what's there, you know. The granite is so different from anything else. These big rounded features. It's a really different style of rock climbing. You look at the rock and you think, is that hold? And you have to kind of find a way to make it feel like a hold. That's what's interesting about it.
2 days after the Great Climb was cancelled for this year, Dave is back in the Cairngorms on the route, psyched and ready to go, convinced he can do it. But there's still more preparation to do.
It's a wee bit of a dino here.
Okay. I suppose I could say that living with Dave is like living with a top athlete. You know, he watches his diet, he does training, but it's quite normal for me to be working away or running through something and he's grunting away in the background doing pull-ups up from the door mantles, but that's just normal.
He's a world-class athlete. It's like looking at Asma Powell or Tyson Gay in terms of 100-metre sprinters. They would be in the World Cup finals in that kind of context. He's just unmatched in Scotland and in the UK. Really.
Dave MacLeod is undoubtedly a world-class climber. You can almost count them on the fingers of one hand. Yet why is someone at the top of their sport not a household name?
The thing about climbing, it's a very individual activity and it happens away from the crowds. In terms of status, it's got to be, you know, an Olympic gold-winning athlete. It's got to be a Matthew Pinson or Ronaldo of football. It is at that level.
Okay, Claire, climbing. This is the hard bit now.
Right.
The thing about climbing and rock climbing is that it just happens in the hills in the background and you just never see it.
After Rhapsody, he made a few changes to the way he dealt with his climbing and the way he dealt with it with me at home as well. I don't know whether he's more internalising it so that he doesn't worry me so much about it, but I know him well enough to know what's all going on, rumbling away inside him.
Dave MacLeod is a rare phenomenon in the world of climbing, someone who is brilliant at many aspects of it, from winter ice to the technical discipline of bouldering. And to achieve all that, he's had the support of his wife, Claire.
Claire intrigues me. She'll usually tell us that if Dave wasn't doing that, then that wouldn't be Dave, and that she's really happy. But I'm absolutely intrigued as to whether she, you know, does she really want him to actually give up doing these death routes? You know, he could do other types of climbing.
One of the things that Claire said was that Dave's very sensitive to the environment of the crag, and that's part of that is just the feeling that everybody has about it. So She felt it was very important for her to feel good about things, or to appear to feel good about things.
I think sometimes people look at Claire and think, oh my God, she must go through so much. How can she belay her husband when on death routes? But I think because Dave is so thoughtful about the routes he doesn't rush into doing them. He doesn't normally take risks, and I think Claire understands that, and is very supportive of Dave. I can't imagine what it's like having to belay your partner on a route where they potentially might die. That is I can't imagine what that's like.
I don't think danger in itself is an attraction, really.
Okay, slack.
What I'm trying to do, to put it really simply, is to do dangerous things safely.
Cheers.
So it's only potentially dangerous. It's only dangerous if you fall off. But as long as you don't fall off, then it's not dangerous. And that's the plan, is to have all these barriers between you and falling off and hurting yourself. So I've got my physical fitness, which will like lessen the chances of me actually falling in the first place. And then I set up all sorts of systems with the protection, like in this case having 2 bailyers with different tasks to try and keep me off the ground if I do fall off.
Stand and retouch, Claire.
The most difficult job for Claire will be if Dave falls off at the crux move. Then his life will be in her hands. But she won't just be holding the rope. At a crucial moment, not a split second too early or too late, she must throw herself down the gully in an attempt to stop her husband smashing into the ground.
If I fall off before I get the skyhook, just jump.
Right.
If I fall off after I get the skyhook, wait and see if the skyhook holds me. But if the skyhook rips,
Jump.
It was a fairly complicated sequence of events that she would have to go through, really. One was that if he fell off, then she shouldn't start running downhill immediately. She should wait for the gear, the poor gear, the highest cluster gear, if that ripped. Because if she ran off before that gear ripped, her pulling him, if she ran down and pulled him down, then that would rip that gear, you see, and then he would go even lower.
We had a plan sorted out where if he fell in a piece of gear, a skyhook ripped, then I would run. But if it held, then my rope wouldn't be weighted, and then the other rope would have stopped him. But if that ripped, and I had to jump down this gully, it's all big boulders. I might break my leg, I might break my ankle, but I think that would be a small price to pay than to save my husband's life and the other end of the rope, possibly. I'd quite willingly throw myself down if it saved his life.
As the hours pass, optimism turns to frustration. The weather is fine, but after days of rain, some of the crux holds won't stay dry. Dave's still hopeful things could improve, so at long last he's starting the climb, leading up to that crucial section and those difficult holds halfway up the first pitch. Then he'll check those holds again and decide whether he'll go for the first ascent today.
The wet holds were a particular problem because they were right at the crux of the climb. They were above the last of the protection. That was the most serious point at which he could come off. And he was fairly convinced that if he'd fallen, then the potential for death was pretty high.
So I'm always trying to convince myself, trying to find ways of thinking about doing dangerous things to make you fool yourself or rationalise that it's not really that dangerous and not so far outside your normal standard that is acceptable for you. So today I was thinking, I'm driving a bomb here at 70 miles an hour. You make a tiny little mistake, lose your concentration for a second, and there's really big consequences. And on this thing, although it feels much more extreme because you're halfway up this cliff and there's no runners clip to the rope, and it's really in your face what's going to happen if you make a mistake. I'm trying to convince myself that there's no way I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to climb it. I'm not going to fall off. So I'm always trying to build myself up into that frame of mind before I'm going to lead a route like that.
Dave's spent the day trying to convince himself that conditions are improving and the holds will dry out. Today's fine, but this summer's appalling weather adds to the pressure. Everyone knows that if success eludes him now, it could be days or even weeks before he can have another go. As the afternoon turns into evening, it's decision time.
Soaking. So annoying because I can do this bit even though it's wet, but there's no way I can risk it. Fall from here and it's death. That's soaking. Look at that. But basically, like, these holes are flat, they're not, you can't really get your fingers around them. You need to use the friction of the rock to actually hold on to them. So if they're wet, there's just no friction at all, I just slide.
Climbers are masters of improvisation. A towel may take just enough moisture from the rock for just long enough to allow Dave to grip the hold.
What I'll do is I'll just see how long it takes to get wet now. And if it's less than 5 minutes, then I can't do it. And if it's more than 5 minutes, I need enough time for me to lower down, tie into the lead, and go for it. I could probably do it if the hole's wet, and I'd probably be fine. But if one of my hands just went and popped off one of these wet holes, well, I'd be dead basically. So it's not really worth losing my life over. So I'm trying to justify it to myself, but I can't. I just have to wait until it's drying.
And that means waiting another day. So Dave and Claire return home for the night. At this level, climbing can be a lonely business, but Claire is often with Dave as he tackles new routes. She's known him almost from the moment he started climbing.
We met at school when I was 15 and he was 16. He was quite the cool kid at school. He was never there actually, I almost got kicked out of school for going climbing so much. You know, a bit of a grunge kid into Nirvana, and I just thought, oh, he's brilliant. We've been together 13 years.
Claire is like really into her baking. It's, if you're into climbing, you know, and you do lots of days on, you can eat as many cakes as you want, really.
He works really hard. I mean, I don't know anybody that works as hard as David. He doesn't have a day off ever. If he goes climbing, he absolutely beasts himself, and he comes home shattered. And then it's straight onto the internet, blogging about what he's done onto his website.
Sort of night after night, sort of like, oh, I can't do this move, like getting really, really frustrated and going into obsessive bouts of training, or like thinking like I need to lose half a stone to do this route, and like walking around for the next 6 weeks like in a bad mood because I can't eat.
I've moaned at him sufficiently for him to like take it down a step and realise that, you know, it might be his obsession but it's not mine, and I don't want to obsess over it.
It's really important that people know what I'm doing. It's quite possible to be an athlete that would be the best in the world in a small sport like climbing, but no one would know what you've done. For instance, like last week I just did a project that I've been trying for about 10 years, and it's really, really important, quite significant. It's the hardest sport route in Scotland. Other Scottish climbers had all tried, but no one has succeeded on, so I've managed to do it now. As soon as I've done it, I have to go straight back and get good photographs, and then write about it on my website, and make sure that all the other climbing websites know about it, and then make sure that all the magazines have the photos.
He got to the top and he was like, oh yeah, and whooping and yelling. And for me, I was like, what was all the fuss about? That looked so easy. You know, it's like, it was so smooth, there was no, you know, huffing or puffing, it just looked like a doddle.
Making a good living is really not important to me at all. From spending most of my career so far living on not very much, I found that I'm actually quite happy that way. I think I make about a third of my living from sponsorship, and then the other 2/3 comes from a mix of coaching, lecturing about climbing, and writing.
I did have fears when he was doing Rhapsody because I didn't like the falls. I didn't like him coming home and saying that he was in pain. And I worry when he's winter climbing because there's a lot of things out with his control. Avalanches, he's been in a big avalanche before. Bad weather, crevasses. But when he's just out cragging, that's like other people going to the office.
Without the help I've had from Claire, there's no way that I could have got as much done in my climbing as I have done. Probably more than half of the routes that I've done, Claire's held the ropes on the actual final lead where I've succeeded on the route. She's also done a lot of the beeling, holding the ropes on the really dull days where I'm just working moves again and again and again. In 5 years' time, what I'd like to be is doing exactly the same thing I'm doing now, but having the time to say, right, I'm fairly close to this route, and I can do it, but only if I take the next 2 or 3 months and do no work whatsoever and just train 6 days a week, all day. I could climb much harder and do all these lines that I've seen, and to make them into routes rather than just projects would be like unbelievable.
Day 2 and everyone's back on the rock face. There's the same ritual of trying to dry the crucial holds. Everyone's feeling under pressure. Dave can only maintain this level of fitness and concentration for a few days. It's important to stay positive, but doubts are emerging about whether it will be possible to climb the route today.
So just stay like that and you'll be fine. That's what it's going to come down to, is like whether that wee bit of hold dries off. If it does, then I'll do it. If it doesn't, it's too dangerous. Yesterday, it was really hard to walk away from it, and now psychologically it's harder because you're psyched, ready, but it's dragging on, and each time you have to get ready, it feels harder. I've also got a runner and a small nut behind here, which could save me if I fall off this part, but the rock that it's in, I don't know if you can pick that up, it's hollow, so I think the rock would just break if I fell on it, but you can sort of pretend that you think it might hold you. Okay, now for the bad boy.
There's such an approach to with this level of difficulty. Mentally, he gets extremely well prepared for it. Physically, he gets extremely well prepared for it. And he knows the rock, he knows what holds he's going to grab hold of, and so on. So he has it, if you like, completely wired.
I mean, I think Dave did feel a lot of pressure on this route, and I don't think it's necessarily because of the pressure of being filmed, just the pressure to do the route. He really wanted to climb the route. And if he doesn't do it today, then he might never get back there with the right conditions, with the right fitness, with a team of belayers. You know, it's not that easy to go and do this route. It's not like 10 metres of gritstone in the peak where you can just nip with your mate and do it.
So that's right on the edge of being acceptable, but it's all right. And it's also the general temperature, it's really warm. So I'm getting a little bit hot when I'm climbing, which isn't good, but still it's just okay and no more.
He sets himself incredibly high standards, and this was a route that he'd recognise as being of quite a high quality, and he hates walking away from things like that. But because of the way he talked about it as a very serious climb and the death potential of it, we all had a feeling that if he was walking away from it, then actually it's quite a scary event. And you know, we were in the situation where this wasn't something certainly that I'd experienced before, that here was somebody who was taking literally life or death decisions.
So I think I'm going to go for it. Obviously the final decision isn't made until I actually climb up to there, the flake on the lead. And then as soon as I leave the flake and start the crux, there's two choices, either get to the top or fall off. So I'm just trying to make that choice now, whether I'm definitely sure that it's going to be okay. And I think I am.
It all starts getting a bit odd and you start questioning what's going on, because all he was doing was climbing up a piece of rock that a tiny number of people would actually ever see. But he was staking his life, literally, on this ascent.
With so much at stake, conditions have to be perfect. Too wet and you can't climb. Too cold and you can't climb. And for this particular route, too hot and you can't climb. And with the temperature warmer than Dave would like, stripping off is the only option.
And I'm like mentally really fired up and nervous. I need to be able to get this off my harness in the middle of a hard move and just hook it straight on the edge. So I had this end already clipped to the rope, So what I want to do is just go, ching, put it on and do the move. I want my fingertips to look like that. Nice and chopped. But you've got to feel focused in everything just right, like just right.
In the end, it comes down to one simple thing. That crucial hold. Would it be dry enough for Dave to have a chance of success, or would it be a fraction too damp and highly dangerous?
As Dave was getting ready at the bottom, he called up to me and asked me whether the hold was still wet. And my immediate thoughts were, I need to give Dave an immediate answer that if I and ah or hesitate and then say yes, then that's going to give Dave worry and hesitation. So I need to give him an immediate response, and it needs to be a logical and fair response. And whilst I didn't want the responsibility of telling him yes, the hold's okay, and then him arriving at it and falling off, I kind of felt a responsibility. He's asked me this question. I know him well, so I gave him a very quick thumbs up, and he set off.
And as he did so, an eerie silence descended on Hell's Lump. No one wanted to make a sound, or move an inch.
I guess a lot of people were saying it was tense and there was an atmosphere and, but that's business as usual for us, I suppose. I just let Dave get on with it. If that's what he wants to do and he wants to make the call that he wants to do it, then fine, I'll be there and I'll hold the ropes and run if required. I was very tense when he actually was climbing. That was horrendous, and I will not, say that it wasn't. It was like a horrible experience.
I don't think Claire was very happy with what was going on. I did hear her say at one point that she didn't think that Dave should do it because of the much higher risk potential attached to this climb compared with everything else he's done. I have no understanding of just how difficult it was because Dave climbs at such a high level that it's completely meaningless for me to look to it and give my interpretation of how hard it is because it's just a long, long way above my capabilities.
As Dave started the climb, everything was looking quite normal. The first third of the climb is relatively straightforward to him, and then he reaches a point 1/3 up where he has some protection in the rock and he's able to stand and shake out. That point is his last point of retreat. He could climb back down to the ground safely if he decided he wanted to, but the moment he leaves that rest point, there is no going back. He either continues and gets to the top, or he falls off. And if he falls off from past that rest point, then he'll probably die.
Halfway up the first pitch, and the crucial decision is made.
So I launched into the moves, and straight away off this flake where you put the final piece of gear in, you have a huge jump. So it's great actually because it wakens you up with a bang. It's like, right, this is the hard climbing now. So it's like jump to an edge, and then you're straight into the sequence.
Immediately, the moves are really hard. Big dynamic moves, crazy moves. And then Dave let out this scream. Immediately, something was wrong. This isn't Dave MacLeod. I've seen him climb dozens of times on really hard routes. Dave does not let out screams like that. And that really just worried me. I think it worried everyone. What the hell is happening?
You get a goodish hold in the middle of the hard climbing where you can stop, or you have to stop and rest for about 30 seconds or a minute, and that hold was what was really scaring me about this whole route. That was the main thing that was worrying me. The reason is because you do have to stop, and it's the one chance in the middle of the hard climbing where you can stop and really think, and you realise where you are. You're in the situation, you're committed. You must do the second hard section. You can't fall, there's no escape, no rescue. You just have to do it. But you've got this time to think and contemplate like what it is you're doing. So it's a horrible, horrible place to be. It's like the worst place to be in climbing, really. That was incredibly scary for me. It's like, oh, I'm losing control over the situation. So the only thing I could think of to do was scream at the top of my voice and get it all out of myself.
I thought, he's off, and I'd done the whole, I'm ready to run, and you're eyeing up your landing zone further down there. I thought, he's off, there's something really gone wrong up there, because I'd been with Dave on literally hundreds of routes, and I've never heard him do anything like that before. That just made me snap. That was pretty horrible.
She was just stock still, I don't know, just absorbing or trying to absorb the situation. Obviously, she's there trying to be controlled, and ultimately that tension had an effect on her, and that she was obviously pretty upset at that moment, with tears filling her eyes and coming down her face and stuff like that. So that was the first sign, really, that, and maybe the first clue that was given by Claire in terms of the absolute tension that she was going through during that climb.
Dave continued climbing, and it was like he was throwing himself at the route, like he'd almost sort of thrown himself with abandon. At this point, 1,000 thoughts are rushing through my head. He's getting nearer and nearer to the wet hold, so I moved the camera over to briefly to look at this wet hold, and it was wetter. So I moved back to Dave, and just 1,000 thoughts run through your head. He's coming towards me. If he does not stay on this hold, then my friend's going to die.
I was aware that when I screamed, that the only thing that would achieve really is to spread the fear on everyone else, because maybe that, and I'm just silently climbing up the rock, and because it must, by definition, look quite smooth and quite in control, it probably gave the impression that I was under quite a lot of control, and I was, but it might give the impression that I was quite relaxed and that there was a big margin of safety. But actually the margin of safety was quite small, or very small.
And I think to myself, this is an utterly crazy position to be in. I'm so close to this guy, and there's absolutely nothing I can do. I can't grab him, I can't do anything, so I just watched. And Dave reached out, stretched out leftwards and grabbed this hold and readjusted on it and stayed on. Dave placed this piece of gear and then moved past, and immediately it fell off down the rope.
At such a moment, this is not a good omen.
For me, it was quite a harrowing experience. To be in a position professionally, and also with somebody who you work with a lot and who's a friend, to be in there and to be so close to it, and to potentially witness this climber in front of you to suddenly not be in front of you. He then reached the last pause point where he could stop momentarily. Still no option of retreating, but from here just a pause for contemplation before he goes on. And then another scream from him. Come on! And this time he's much closer to me, and this time this is like, something, this is getting really serious.
As my husband, I desperately don't want him to fall off, so all I'm thinking is please don't fall off, please don't fall off. And you're trying to will, it's bizarre. You like physically want to will him up the route and for him to stay on. You're just crossing everything, like hoping that you'll get through it. I can't really say I thought of anything else when he was at the crux. It's just, please stay on, and that's all that's going through your head.
I knew there's the risk, but I never really before until then he was actually going to fall until I watched him on Helm's Run. Yeah, it was probably the most scariest bit of filming I've ever done. It's always odd when you're filming because you've got two things going on. You're trying to watch the climb as a spectator, but you're also, I've got a job to do, I've got to try and capture it. So there's a lot of technical things I'm kind of worrying about, focus, exposure, blah, blah, blah. But on this one, it more than ever, I think it transcended the film role, and I was watching the climbing, and it got more and more terrifying. As Dave climbed higher and got past the bad gear, he was shouting. And then some of the gear fell off, and it was frightening. It really felt like he could fall. It really felt like he could fall and die.
It was so difficult that if he had any moisture developing on his fingertips, then he wouldn't be able to hold on to the holds. It's a bit like if you're at home in your living room and you stand with your toes on the skirting board and you have your fingers around the light socket and try and hang on there with both hands, and that's the sort of level that Dave's at. It's not like paint by numbers. You don't go hold 1, hold 2, hold 3 or 4. It's actually much more complex than that.
Finally, Dave MacLeod's reached the end of pitch 1 and safety.
Okay, I'm safe! It's a very strange experience. I don't think I would call that pleasantly scared.
In spite of the weeks of planning, nothing has prepared Dave for this moment.
Yeah, right now I don't feel like I enjoyed that very much. I'm sure I will do later, but I'm very, very glad that that's over. I'm still alive.
Earlier this year, Dave and Claire moved to Fort William to be closer to the mountains. Now they live in the shadow of Ben Nevis in what may possibly be the smallest house in the Highlands.
Hello, come in. Welcome to the TARDIS.
Well, we both are self-employed now, so it's probably like a lot of everybody else that's self-employed. It comes in fits and starts. You not get paid for months when you're down to nothing.
I think both of us have the same attitude that it's not what's ever been important to either of us.
No.
As long as you can go to the shop and buy food.
Yep.
Then it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty tiny place from the outside. It looks like a wee tiny box, but it's not that bad. You can live in it. I'll give you the tour. Start off in the bathroom. This bathroom is actually twice the size of our last one, believe it or not. I can actually turn around in it and not hit anything. So I'm quite pleased with that. Bedroom, Claire?
This is bedroom. We've got our Hilti battery on charge, ready to bolt Scotland's crags at any given moment.
At times, what I do in my climbing, I think I'm really demanding, and I go through these periods where for a couple of weeks, I literally just disappear into my own world of getting scared. I've thought a lot about how long I can climb at the standard I'm climbing, and I think with the knowledge I've got, I'm aiming to continue doing what I'm doing for several more years. I think that's perfectly achievable as long as I don't make any daft mistakes or try and do too much. And recognise the signs of when I'm starting to do things wrong.
He is extremely hardworking. I don't know anybody else that lives for their passion quite as much as he does. He's extremely intelligent. He's very considered. He's, I don't know, I could go soppy.
Dave's success should now be assured, but he's still only halfway up the rock face. The second pitch should be easier, but there are still some extremely difficult moves ahead.
That's where it gets a little bit harder.
Well, when Dave went for pitch 2, I was feeling pretty comfortable and blasé that pitch 1 was where the difficulties were. And Dave had been pretty blasé about pitch 2 as well, rather than spending time preparing it and working out the moves and also working out where he can put his protection in the rock. I think Dave was certainly getting frustrated on it, and he seemed to have a harder time than he was expecting.
Pitch 2 is a couple of grades easier than the pitch 1, and so therefore we'd kind of thought, oh, if he does pitch 1, everything will be fine. But then when it came to pitch 2, it was still hard. It's still hard climbing. It's still in the mountains, and everyone's still very stressed, including Dave. He still had to fight and climb hard to that second pitch.
That experience for him on the first pitch must have had quite a heavy impact on him. He really should have been able to just breeze through, but he was pretty slow and hesitant, and then he reached a point where he was really struggling to work out how to get through the moves, because it's so steep and overhanging. To hang around there to work it out, it's just making you more and more physically tired.
I took comfort in the fact that if Dave didn't think it was going to work, he wouldn't be there, he wouldn't be doing it, because for all that he does really hard things and really dangerous things, he's very cautious and very careful, and he doesn't expose himself to unnecessary risk.
My feeling before I went on it was that if you could climb the first pitch, you can climb the second pitch. So I looked at it and I thought, yeah, that's within my ability. I need to worry about that at the time. The main thing to worry about is this pitch, because this first pitch is you're gonna kill yourself if you fall, so you take that really seriously. The second pitch wasn't quite so serious for most of it, although what I discovered when I started climbing was that the rock was actually quite loose there.
So watch this here, I got to pull on some loose flakes.
When I got on it, my sort of quota of fear for the day was maybe over.
Yes, come on.
So I was pulling in these holds that were creaking and footholds snapping off, and I was having to climb where you're feeling like, if this hold with my right hand goes, I'm going to be able to stay on with my left hand only. So you're having to constantly worry about spreading the load between your 4 points of contact, which is not a very good situation to be in when you're rock climbing.
Okay, Tony, this is the worst part. Just watch us on the red rope. Watch me on red.
If he felt it was going to work, then it was incumbent on everybody else to buy into that and think, he's going to do it, we've got to support this, and we've got to do everything we can to make it work for him. And part of that was just making sure that the vibe was right and the feel was right.
I'm getting eaten alive by midges.
The midges started getting worse and worse. So I was getting eaten alive. I was wearing a t-shirt and I was climbing, and I was aware of them biting me all the way up my arms and on my head and everything, and there's nothing I could do because I was in the middle of these difficult moves. So it was a good challenge.
Oh, these holes are soaking, man.
There's an addiction to climbing hard because of the process that's involved in it, and the addictive part is discovering that you can actually do things that seemed impossible. That's an addictive feeling, I think.
Tony! Okay, I'm just going to go for it. Keep the red rope nice and slack. Okay, climbing.
The challenge of climbing is to do the hardest possible moves in the most demanding situation. So you've got two aspects there. You've got like the gymnastic aspect of really difficult movement on rock, but combined with that you've got having to stay in control in a really dangerous situation.
Watch me here!
I'm really under total control when I'm doing a route like that. And although I'm close to my limit of margin of safety, I'm never over it. I'm always know exactly where that limit is. That's why I can keep doing routes like this for years and years and not have any accidents. Because I know exactly where my limit is, and although I go very close to it, I never ever go over it because I know exactly where it is. But for this route, this is an exceptional route. This is like the most dangerous route I've ever done, so it's the closest to that limit I've ever allowed myself to go. The best moment is when I think you start to explore the possibilities of a route you're doing and start to realise that this piece of rock that you've been working on that seemed impossible, that you might actually have a chance, and you're starting to learn parts of the route, piece together the moves, and starting to hatch a bit of a plan for how you're going to approach it. And then all of a sudden you're like, there's a chance I could actually do this thing. That's amazing. Like the last time I tried it, it seemed impossible. And then when you get further down the line of that process, and you're finishing it off, that's still very satisfying.
Not the lot right here.
But when you've actually done the route and completed it, the journey is like finished. It's over, and there's nothing more you can do to sort of. I mean, it's like expressing yourself really. So it's over, and you have to go and find something else to enjoy.
Oh yes. Okay, Tony, I'm safe! Whew. That was desperate, man. Oh, getting eaten alive by midges. That was really scary, really scary top pitch. Oh, the holes are just like, yeah, same with the gear.
At the end of the day, once he topped out, it's not jubilation that he's topped out. I never feel jubilant when he tops out of these climbs. It's just like, thank God that's over.
It sort of makes you reevaluate, like what's the limit of acceptable danger you're prepared to put yourself through. And that was like, and I haven't quite decided whether it was either right on the limit or just beyond the limit.
On this climb, Dave MacLeod's been nearer than ever to crossing that invisible line. Now at the top, there's no sense of triumph that usually accompanies successful new routes. The risks that he's taken are only now beginning to sink in. This has been a long journey to hell and back.
We had almost, if you like, gotten away with it, and I came away with a lot of questions as to whether I'd ever want to be involved with something like that again.
There's no doubt about it that that is the most dangerous route I've ever done. I've done all the hard routes in Scotland, and that is the most dangerous route I've ever climbed in my life.